Hi, this is Vinita, and I'm going to do a painting demonstration for you. This is a scene of an old barn in Coquille, Oregon, which is just a little inland from where I live, but it's still affected by the coastal air, has these great rolling hills and really wide valleys, and then this old barn has a lot of character. I have the reference photo printed out in black and white so that I can really see the values and not get overly concerned about the actual colors in the photo. I have the scene sketched out on a piece of rough paper. This is a 140-pound rough. This is Saunders Waterford, and it's dry. It's a quarter sheet. I also have this strip of blue tape across there, which you can obviously see. I'm going to use the tape to help cover up this foreground area, and that's going to allow me to paint this area first without having to worry about that line there, and then I can pull the tape off. That's my plan anyway. We'll see how it goes, because I really don't like using masking fluid. Now notice that the top of this tape is uneven. All I did is I took the tape, there it is, I just took the tape and tore it right down the middle, and that gave me a bit of an uneven edge. I'm hoping that that will help depict the grassy edge, which is not a hard line. Like I said, that's the plan. Speaking of the plan, I've wrote out a list of steps because I want to make sure I get everything done that I want to get done before I take the tape off. So I have 10 steps. This is nice to do if you have a painting that's dependent on things happening in a certain order, and if it's an order that's different than you're used to doing. So for instance, I'm not going to do this guy first, and that's one reason I wanted to give myself notes, because normally I always do this guy first. So I'm just going to prop this up where I can see it, and hopefully that will keep me going in the right direction. So the first part that I want to do is this area in front of the barn. You can see in the reference photo, hopefully that's not too shiny. I keep it in this sleeve to help keep paint off of it. But you can see that there's a lot of foliage and grasses. There's a big tree. I don't know if I want to put that tree in, but I want to just get some nice subtle grassy looking areas. This picture was taken in June, so the actual colors it still looks pretty green, but I can, if I want to, have it be a bit more neutral, like it would be later in the summer. So when I mix up a color, I don't think I want it to look too spring-like. And I want to keep it fairly light because I can always come back in and darken areas. I don't know if you can see, but there are little areas that are darker. And I'm also thinking I'd like a bit of a directional line leading to, there is a doorway in the barn. Maybe I drew it to be right there, but I think I want it to be right here. So maybe just a hint of some kind of little path coming up there, like that. Okay. So that pathway is probably going to be more gray rather than green. So I'll try to get that in first. This is a little area to test my colors on. Always nice to do. Okay. Now I can go to more of, I'm kind of thinking like grass that is starting to dry. So it's not that real vibrant green, but it's also not just like the color of straw. And over here, I want to leave some whites, even though I didn't really draw them in. I may want to try to put in a few sheep that might be walking down this hillside. So if I leave the whites there, I can make that decision later on. If I don't leave any whites, then it's going to be harder to do. Maybe a bit more of a nice green color. And because I have this tape here, I can actually take advantage of that tape and get just slightly darker as it comes down. Slightly darker and maybe even a little cooler, like that. That blue on that tape is kind of distracting. That's why I don't really like using blue tape. But for a case like this, it could really save me a lot of time and effort. And by the way, when I put the tape down, I did press down to make sure that it's gonna keep the paint from going down there. Just trying to get a nice little green color like what I had, because I need to put in this area. I think just like that is probably good. I do want to take another brush, so I know this brush would be clean and fairly dry, and I'm just going to run across that upper line. I don't know about you, but I know plenty of times I've ended up with a really harsh line between the foreground and the side of a building, so that'll help keep that from happening. The barn is pretty gray, so it's not going to be competing with this color. Same thing there. See, there was a real hard line across there. I'm going to try to make that line disappear. I can even soften this line probably. This is going to be quite a bit darker back there, but I can still soften it. So I think that's good. It would actually be nice if I had a little bit of salt, but I don't think I have any. But if I sprinkled a little bit of salt there, that would be pretty cool. Maybe I'll just try to remember to spatter it as it gets to that damp stage. Okay, I'm looking at my list now, and the next step is the sky. I'm trying to get my brush pretty clean so I don't end up with a green sky. And I want to put in just a bit of water, and I'm going to try to get some directional lines with clouds in the sky so that the sky is angling down this way, this area is angling down this way, the foreground's angling down that way. Now my palette's a little bit clean, and I really prefer to have a sky color that's not just blue paint. So it may seem very strange to be throwing in other colors, but then I take it back to blue. So it's going to look blue, but there's hints of other colors in there. Now I'm not going to paint in the mountains right now, so I just have to look at this lower line and make sure that it's blending out to basically just water. This I probably want to bring down. Maybe just about like that. And the barn, you can see that the roof of the barn is very light in value. But if I just put a bit of this sky color there, that's going to be too much. I have a feeling. I just want a little tiny bit. There we go. That's going to dry nice and light, and it will help, it will prevent the barn from feeling so static in the scene, because it's a man-made object. It's a man-made object. It's already going to stand out within the landscape. So the more you can integrate it, the more it's going to feel like a scene rather than a landscape with a barn in it. Okay, that's probably good. Just want to check my edges on my clouds. This one's a little harsh right up at the top, so I can soften that. And everything else looks okay. I like how that sky is looking. Okay, so next step is the small distant field right there. This is already probably dry enough. I can go ahead and put in that small distant field. I was going to try to get some texture here, but I don't know. There we go. That's probably good. I don't want to get stuff in the sky. So this distant field, even though it's a very small area in the painting, it's really important because it gives that look of distance. You know, it's tiny little triangle there. It also mimics the triangle shape of the barn, just in reverse. But you can, you see the barn and then you just notice this distant field. So I want to carefully put this in, getting the right color. I don't think there's such a thing as the perfect color. Like, you can't just use a formula for color. Like this is the color for a distant field. But I want a green that still feels green, because I know these fields, they're almost always green. But I don't want it to compete with any other green that I have more in the foreground. So I want it to be fairly, I think that's probably good. And I'm going to use a smaller brush for this because I want to leave a few lights back in there, just kind of skip around a bit. And then I can even change up the color slightly. Doesn't have to be drastic, but just a slight change. And I got to be aware of this area where these two places meet, because this is still damp. And that means I don't really want to be touching it. Now over here, I can just blend that out because I'm going to paint in this foliage, which will cover this whole area. It's pretty solid. Okay, so that's good. I'm going to leave that and look, what do I have to do next? Next I have the trees behind the barn on the right. Well, it's still a little wet. So, is there anything I can do? I think I could go ahead and paint in the barn. Give that a chance to dry. The side of the barn is real light weathered wood. So what I'd like to do is paint in a variety of grays. So I'm just going to start I think I need to go with a little smaller brush so that I can change up the color as I go. That burnt sienna kind of took over that area. It's okay, we'll get back to gray here in a minute. Just trying to think of what other color could I kind of throw in there, just a little hint. And I'm going to go ahead and continue right on over. Maybe leave a few whites over on this side. If I paint in the tree that's in this in front of the barn, a lot of this is going to disappear. And then I want to think about indicating some of the missing pieces, you know, missing boards, the roof is not on there straight, you know, things like that. It's really easy to do at this point, and it gives the illusion of a lot more detail than what you're actually painting in. So that's pretty good. Now let's see. I think I can paint the those trees, but I do have this upper section, and I'll go ahead and put that in. I want this to be lighter than this lower section. And I'll paint in the shadows later on. Okay, that's good. So onto the trees. Now this is very dark in the reference photo, but I don't want it to feel real heavy back there, even though it's evergreens. It's really easy, especially for me, to get things too heavy when I'm painting trees. got a little bit of color over there. I think I made a mess with the back of the reference photo. I set it on some paint. So maybe I'll just put it right there. So for the trees, let's see. I need it to be, you know, kind of dark, but probably more like a dark mid-tone rather than a dark like it looks in the reference photo. So I'm thinking like kind of a dusty green color. See if that looks green enough. That might do it. I think that'll do. So if I could get this in with leaving a few open areas, that would be great. We'll see how I do here. These trees are so tall that we're really only seeing the bottom portion, which happens to be real solid. So I kind of do the same thing that I do with the clouds. I just check my shapes and see how do they look. You know, do I need to soften a shape? This is a really pretty cloud. So if I can keep that, that would be nice. Not cover it up. Always good advice to try to keep the interesting areas and cover up the areas that aren't so interesting. Easier said than done when you're trying to also work all in one go and, you know, get the color right and the shapes right and all that kind of stuff. So this ended up being much warmer than what I thought it would look like. But that's okay. I'm going to paint in a tree trunk right there. And I don't think I want to go over any farther. Yeah, I think I'm going to leave it just like that. I left a little light area for me to paint in a smaller tree. I'm not sure if that's going to work or not. And then before this has a chance to dry, I need to get in some cooler shadow colors. So when I mix up the cooler shadow colors, I don't want to just add blue because in my experience, blue will kind of jump out at me. So I'm going with a very subtle, more of a blue violet, and I can just drop this in. Like I said, this turned out a lot warmer than what I intended it to be. That is one disadvantage to actually painting under studio lighting, is sometimes it's harder to see the actual tones until they get more spread out. It's easier to see it under natural light, but I can't complain. The studio lighting makes it a lot nicer because I don't cast hard shadows onto the painting. All right, not real thrilled with that, but it's okay. We're gonna just keep going. Next would be the trees. Let's see, trees behind barn on the right, distant mountain, right there. So I'm gonna paint in the distant mountain. This is still really damp right there, and that could cause a problem. So I think I'm gonna take a break here. I've gotten to step 5, but I've already done the sides of the barn and the shed. So it might be a good time to take a break, let this dry, and then come back and finish the rest of my steps.